Hello everyone. Hello everyone. Welcome back to my channel. Very anticipated live. I see everyone is already there. Looking forward to my guest, to Mr. Scott Ritter, who is back in the house. Before we start, I want to say that I very much appreciate all of you being with us, your likes, your comments, sharing the video, supporting Scott's work, Scott's information as well, and also me. All the links to support me you have down below this video. My locals is very important, just in case. Instagram, mailing lists, and all the other places, as well as the website that Scott has, Scott Ritter Extra, and there's another link separate down below for Scott's books. So if you want to read Scott's books, and there are many, by the way, just click on that link. Welcome back, Scott.
Thanks. Are you saying I write too much?
Anyway, today, on the serious notes, we have to go into what's going on in Palestine, Gaza, and Israel. I have 6 questions today. One question is from the previous live stream that was in the super chat from the viewer. Like I've promised, that I will address in our next live stream. So we're gonna do it today. But let me start with this. Since the beginning of this conflict between Israel and Palestine, 1 of every 200 children in Gaza have been killed by Israeli attacks. 31 of the premature babies were successfully moved from the Al-Shifa hospital. Originally, there were 39 babies, 8 didn't make it. I am not mother myself. I still believe that I maybe be one in this lifetime. Watching those children, especially those images, truly breaks my heart. I want to ask you, what military has bombarded that hospital and other places, and who gave the order to go forward with that?
Well, I mean, it's the Israeli military that bombed the Al-Shifa hospital and other hospitals in Gaza. There's no disputing this. Israel acknowledges that their Air Force did this. They use American-provided aircraft and American-provided bombs. But the Israelis did it. They will claim that this was a legitimate military target because Hamas had built an underground command center beneath the Al-Shifa hospital and was using the hospital grounds for purposes prohibited under international humanitarian law. This argument is unsustainable legally and ethically. One of the key aspects is we need to start off by noting that a hospital is the most protected civilian object there is in international humanitarian law. The notion that a hospital, in order to convert a hospital from a civilian object to a military object capable of being struck, the requirements are such that you have to take into account 2 things. One, they call distinction, the distinction between a civilian object and a military object. And also you have to take into account proportionality, meaning that even if you find some minor, failure on the part of Hamas or the Al-Shifa hospital, where they have done something that is in contravention of what one would expect from a hospital, the scope and scale of that violation has to be immense to justify the military action taking place. There needs to be proportionality. But before we even get to proportionality, the issue of distinction is such, there can't be guesswork. What you don't get to do in war is say, I think there's something going on in this civilian object, therefore I'm going to bomb it. You don't even get to say, I really believe strongly that something is going on, therefore I'm going to bomb it. You have to be able to say, I have irrefutable evidence that something is going on right now at the moment I'm bombing it. You don't get to play the game that Israel did, which says, we have intelligence that dates back to this time that we believe is still valid. No, 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 no. That intelligence is then. You could have bombed it then if it was accurate intelligence, but you don't get to say we have old intelligence that we believe continues to be viable. Therefore, we're going to bomb the hospital. That is a war crime, a clear-cut, no debate war crime. And what Israel did is say we have old intelligence. Everybody saw the fancy videotape that Israel put out there showing the command center and all the stuff down underneath it. They said, this is the case we're attacked. Then they said, and we have reason to believe. But then they went in, they bombed it, they invaded it, they attacked it. They committed atrocity after atrocity, to include cutting off electricity, and created the conditions where, a number of these premature infants died. And it's a direct result of the Israeli military intervention. Israel is to blame. They are responsible for every single death that took place of the premature infants, and also everybody else who died as a result of their attacks on the Al-Shifa hospital. You can't come in after the facts and then go on a fishing expedition. The fact that Israel right now is still searching for something means that the issue of distinction wasn't satisfied at the moment they attacked. It is a war crime. It is prosecutable under international law, and every Israeli involved should be and must be prosecuted. You can't say a week later, aha, we found it. No, that's not how distinction works. You don't get to go on a fishing expedition. You needed to know that at the moment you launched the attack, and they didn't. It's a war crime. But again, we come to proportionality. Whatever Israel claims to have found to date is not what they claim to exist. The hospital was not a command center, The hospital was not a barracks facility. The hospital was not a military object. The hospital was a civilian object. And also we have to make certain distinctions. The hospital is allowed to treat Hamas soldiers who are wounded. The hospital is allowed to take the weapons of the wounded Hamas soldiers and store them on the grounds. That is not a violation of anything. The hospital can be guarded by armed soldiers. And here's the important thing. Those armed soldiers are allowed to defend the hospital from any attacks coming from out. That's not a violation of international humanitarian law, and it doesn't make it a military object. A military object means that the hospital has to be doing something other than what it was designed to do, that its primary mission has become military in nature, not civilian in nature. That was never the case, could never be the case, no matter what Israel tries to do. This was a crime. Now let's just get back to what you talked about, Anya. You may not be a mother, and I respect the fact that you hope to be a mother in the future, and I hope that that dream comes true for you. I am a father. I was present at the birth of my daughters. I know how fragile they are when they come into this life. And there's no excuse for what Israel has done. None whatsoever. You can't argue this away. You can't scream Hamas, Hamas, terrorism, terrorism, when the reality is that Israel is the terrorist. Israel is violating international law. Israel is committing the war crimes. Israel murdered those children. There's no other way to characterize this. And Israel should be called upon to pay a price. And that price should be being held accountable to the international community under the rule of law. Israel and those who perpetrated these crimes should be prosecuted under the International Court of Justice or the International Criminal Court. And why they continue to be given a free pass on this is beyond me. The world seems to have condemned them. We see millions of people in the streets around the world, and more are coming out. But governments have yet to articulate, even Turkey, which has called this a war crime, called this genocide. It doesn't work by just saying it. There are actions that need to be taken to make it so. Turkey needs to go before the International Court of Justice and file a complaint citing genocide for Israel to be held to account. And so far, not a single government has had the courage to call Israel out as the war criminal state that it is.
I think those images will be with me for a very long time, Scott, that I saw with those children.
They should. They should. They should give you nightmares for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
You and everybody else. You should never recover from those images. Never. They should be with you forever because they're that horrible.
And you know, when you said about no one is really reacting, it's actually a very good segue to my second question, because I want to put the religious aspect of that area, of that region, for a side, just on the side for a moment. And I want to read something and then ask you this. Geologists and natural resources economists have confirmed that the occupied Palestinian territory lies above sizable reservoirs of oil and natural gas wells, Area C of the occupied West Bank, and the Mediterranean coast of the Gaza Strip. So here is my question, because when we had our live stream with Andrei Martyanov, when this conflict has started, I talked about the land. I think they are after that region mainly because of the resources and how much money they will make from that area. In your opinion, Scott, what they are really after? Because this looks to me like, you know, I don't know if they put US troops there, if they will be British petroleum, US gas companies as well. This looks to me like it's a big setup just for the profit.
Well,
what do you think?
Well, first of all, we have to acknowledge that while some of the gas reserves or fields have been developed and have shown potential, a lot of this stuff is still theoretical, meaning there's theoretical ability to exploit to the tune of hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars worth of resources. That's a lot of money. But here's the thing. The Americans don't care. The developers don't care where the gas is. We'll do business with anybody. We've proven that. We'll do business with anybody as long as the contractual relationship is one that gives us the ability to generate an immense profit. So if there was a two-state solution where there was a Palestine and an Israel, from a energy company, energy security standpoint, it doesn't matter who is it. In fact, the energy corporations would prefer a two-state solution because they need stability. When you're going to invest tens of billions or hundreds of billions of dollars into developing a oil gas site for production, the last thing you need is to do that in a region where war can break out at any moment. So they don't want what exists now. They don't want controversy. They don't want conflict. They want stability. And I think the world is now recognizing that the relationship that exists with Israel and Hamas, Israel and Palestine, Israel and its neighbors right now is an unsustainable relationship. So I don't believe that people are promoting this conflict for the purpose of the oil and gas. I do believe that people are concerned about that. They would like to make money off it, but I believe that nobody who's going to talk about hundreds of billions of dollars of investment is going to invest that money when a war can break out and their investment goes away that quick. So they want stability. And I think prior to October 7th, I think people were saying that stability will come through the implementation of the Abrams Accords, the ability to get Israel to normalize relations with its neighbors. But the problem is that doesn't solve the Palestinian issue. Therefore, it doesn't solve the issue of Palestine's rights going forward. Because if there's not a Palestinian state or a recognized Palestinian state, that land, that projection, what would be their sole economic exploitation zone, is under controversy. And to give you an example of how that matters, when Israel was drawing the line between it and Lebanon on how to divvy up these gas fields for exploration, the Israelis went ahead and jolted the line a little bit to the north to get key aspects of those gas fields under there. And Hezbollah, not the Lebanese government, by the way, Hezbollah who says we exist to resist illegal Israeli occupation of Lebanese soil. Ongoing occupation of the Sheba farms near the Golan Heights is why there's this continued fighting. But Hezbollah said, no, 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 bring that back to where it needs to be, or we go to war. And guess what happened? Israel had to bring that line back to where it was because they didn't want to go to war against Hezbollah because they would have lost everything, because Hezbollah would have destroyed all of the Israeli infrastructure and prohibited continued development. So peace and stability is actually the desired outcome for anybody talking oil and gas. Right now, in a post-October 7th environment, nobody's talking about the Abrams Accord anymore. That's out the window. They're all talking about the need for a Palestinian state because they need stability if they're going to invest all that money. So now the question is, why is this happening? If everybody says that stability is the key, why are we doing this? It has nothing to do with oil and gas. It has everything to do with religion. In fact, it's the religion of the political Zionists, what I call the perversion of the Jewish faith, hijacking the Jewish faith and using biblical references to resurrect a notion of Eretz Israel, a greater Israel, or Israel defined by the Bible as interpreted by these political Zionists who say that all this territory, much of which is, if you've looked at the map they put out there, it ain't Israel, man. They're going into Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia. They're taking it all because the Bible gave it to them. God gave it to them. And that's what's driving this governing coalition that Benjamin Netanyahu has put together is cobbled with some of the most far-right, extreme, political parties in Israel. And these people, they say and do horrible things. These people actually articulate genocide on an ongoing basis. That right now the narrative that if you saw John Kirby, he answered a question yesterday from Fox News, I believe, or it was aired on Fox News. I don't know who asked it, but they said, the anti-Israeli protesters are calling him Genocide Joe, because he's supporting the Israeli actions. And Kirby lashed out. It's not genocide. And if you're going to call it genocide, you have to, go after the Hamas. They're the ones who are articulating no Israelis, no Jews from the river to the sea. That's the genocide. And I just felt like shouting. In fact, as I did shout at the TV, I got some people in my household angry at me because I'm not supposed to manifest my frustration in that way. But it's horrible because the Israeli government, look, Benjamin Netanyahu himself made a reference to I might get this wrong, the Amaleks. It's from Genesis, from early Deuteronomy and other Old Testament chapters. But there are people in the region that harassed the Israelis as they moved from Egypt to Israel. They attacked their columns, etc. And so biblical justice was brought down upon them, and they were basically ordered by God to kill every man, woman, child, all the cattle, all the suckling pigs, everybody. Kill them all. That's a biblical reference. And the prime minister of Israel is saying that the Palestinians are the Amaleks and they must be treated accordingly. So he's calling for genocide. Literally, the head of Israel is calling for genocide, and we didn't say a damn word, we being the United States. Where's John Kirby calling him out, saying, oh, no, you can't say that. That's genocide. The head of security, the minister of security, is saying the same thing, that Palestinians must be eliminated in totality. You have other ministers articulating the desire to evict the Palestinians from Gaza, to remove them from Eretz Israel, to eliminate this threat. A lot of people talk about Hamas, and they say, the Hamas charter, when it was written in the mid 80s, early 90s, talked about from the river to the sea. And the U.S. Congresswoman from Michigan was condemned. By Congress. They voted to ostracize her because she said from the river to the sea. And they said, that's anti-Semitic. You want the eradication of the Jews. You're promoting genocide. Hey, heads up, people. You know who invented the term from the river to the sea? The Likud party of Israel. That was in their original charter when they put it out, when they formed in the 1950s. They don't believe in a Palestine. They don't believe in the Palestinian people. They believe that all the Palestinians should be eliminated, that Israel is Eretz Israel, the greater Israel, and they've never changed their outlook. Benjamin Netanyahu is a Likud party member heading up the government. It is the Israeli government that is the government of genocide, and they are actively carrying out this policy of genocide towards the Palestinian people today as we speak. So guess what, Joe Biden? You are Genocide Joe. And everybody in your administration is a supporter and facilitator of genocide. And everybody in the mainstream media who continues to articulate the Israeli promoted narrative about Hamas and the Palestinian people are supporters of genocide. Straight up. This is mass murder on a scale. And the other thing that gets me is Kirby. He got a little angry. You know, I like it when John Kirby gets angry because it means he's been caught in a very morally compromising position. And he said, "This sometimes you have to wonder, do they even think before they speak? I know they've killed too many civilians. Really? Joe, what's enough? I mean, okay, we agree that 12,000, 13,000 is too many. We agree. What's acceptable, John? What's an acceptable number? How many premature babies is it okay to kill? I mean, one, John? One? We can pick one? How about two, John? If 3, 4, 5, what's a good enough number for you, John? How many thousands of Palestinians is it okay for Israel to kill? 1,000? 2, 5? Where would you have drawn the line, John? 8,000? I mean, and imagine that. Imagine the lottery of life where a Palestinian pulls the number 7,999. Oh, damn it. Bam, I'm dead. But that's okay. That's an okay number. There's nothing wrong with killing me, but the Palestinian that grabs number 8,000 can't kill him because that's where John Kirby has drawn the line. The immorality of the American position and the lack of respect it shows to the humanity of the Palestinian people is unnerving and disturbing and disgusting. Again, war is hell. There's collateral consequences of war. The civilians always pay the price, always pay the price. But the point is, there's no acceptable number. We understand there's the reality of war. We understand that there will be a number, but whatever that number is needs to be treated as unacceptable because the goal of every military, every moral military, should be to eliminate collateral casualties to the greatest extent possible. We should be seeking to make that number as close to zero as possible, knowing that we never will because that's war. That's why we shouldn't go to war, because war kills innocent people. It never accomplishes what you set it out to accomplish. But John Kirby sat there and said that there apparently is an acceptable number, because when you say that 13,000 is too many, that means there's a number that's not too many. John Kirby and the Biden administration and everybody else who sits there and advocates for continued Israeli military action, you need to explain to me what your number is and how you came to that number and how you will explain that to those who died, those whose lives were lost, those who were killed by the Israelis within that acceptable number. Why are their deaths acceptable and no one else is? It's just a morally unsustainable position.
Monsters.
They're all monsters. They're all monsters. Yeah.
They are monsters. There's no another word to use. Scott, I came across this recently. I want to ask your opinion. Both Benjamin Netanyahu and the Palestinian president, if I mispronounce his name, apologies, I think Mahmoud Abbas, both of those men are the graduates of World Economic Forum. And when I discovered this, because, there is a bigger plan they have, one government, etc. Do you think they are in cahoots behind the scenes?
Anya, they're not in cahoots behind the scenes. They're in cahoots. I mean,
they are in cahoots.
What do you mean behind the scenes? There's no behind the scenes taking place. Mohammed Abbas is the most corrupt man, one of the most corrupt men in the world. He's the guy who's supposed to be the head of the Palestinian Authority. He's the president. He's not democratic. He won't hold an election because he knows he'll lose. He exists because the Palestinian Authority is a concoction of Israel and the Arab states to provide a politically face-saving mechanism to pretend they care about the Palestinian people when in fact they're doing nothing for the Palestinians. He is a billionaire. How do you become the billionaire of the Palestinian? I have to tell you right now, man, if I were a Palestinian, I would not accept this at all. You don't deserve $1 billion, Mr. President. Maybe your salary should be set at $150,000, or we can give you $250,000 a year. But you haven't been president that long. So even if you saved all your little pennies, shekels, and whatever, you'd only be a millionaire, Mr. President. But now you're a billionaire. Where'd you get your billions? Who gave you your billions? Why do you have billions? And why haven't those billions been spent on the Palestinian people that need it? You know, you're the head of Palestine, but there are refugee camps. And you got $1 billion? Why haven't you gone in and built villas for the refugees instead of having villas for you and your Fatah accomplices? No, that's one of the biggest problems. And people keep going, Hamas, 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 Hamas. What the hell do you want Hamas to do? Because there's no one standing up for the Palestinian people. No one, not their president, the most corrupt man imaginable, not Fatah, which doesn't stand for anything, not the Palestinian Authority, because they sold out to Israel a long, long time ago. There's no behind the scenes here, Anya. It's happening right there in our face. They have said, we will protect Israel. We will guarantee Israel's security by suppressing the will of the Palestinian people. And who else is in cahoots? All of the Arab nations. This is why it's so difficult right now. You know, who comes out and articulates on behalf of the Palestinian people? The number one is, you know, Turkey, Erdogan, a Turk. Then we get the axis of resistance, the Iranians, Hezbollah, the Houthi, the Shia in Iraq, the Shia in Syria are articulating. But what about Egypt? Not a damn word. What about Jordan? Not a damn word. Why? Because they don't care about the Palestinian people. The Palestinian problem has been used by both Egypt and Jordan to enhance their stature in the West. Egypt's military budget is dominated by American contributions, which are linked dollar to dollar to what we give Israel. So as long as Israel's receiving money, Egypt receives money. They need this conflict to go. The king of Jordan is a Hashemite Saudi. He ain't a Jordanian. He's not from Jordan. Now, he may have been born there, but the Hashemite family is a Saudi family that was given Jordan by the British at the end of World War I. He doesn't rule that country. They're not his people. And he knows, he looks at the majority of his population, realizing that they're Palestinian refugees, and he's nervous. This is why his father, you know, there's a group that's called the Black September group. Black September, I think, goes back to September of 1970, when the Jordanian monarchy turned on the Palestinian refugee camps in Jordan because they feared them. They feared them because the reality is that, you know, Jordan could very well be Palestine under certain circumstances. A lot of Israelis are promoting that notion, but he's afraid of it. The Syrian government has Palestinian refugee camps there outside of Damascus, and they leverage that to their benefit. Everybody leverages the Palestinian people. Nobody cares about the Palestinian people. The Saudis sold them out. The Kuwaitis sold them out. The Bahraini government sold them out. Everybody, Sergio, you're 100% right. Everybody has used the Palestinians to promote themselves, and the only people not getting anything out of this are the Palestinian people. So enter Hamas. And, you know, we can sit there and say what you want about Hamas. When I first encountered Hamas, when I went to Israel in the 1990s, they were a 100% terrorist organization. Their job was to blow things up in Israel to disrupt the peace process that Yitzhak Rabin had entered into with Yasser Arafat, the Oslo I and Oslo II Accords. Their job was to blow things up so that that couldn't happen. And to the Israeli peoples, I give them credit for this. You know, when I was there, you know, things would go boom all the time on you. And people were dying literally 100 yards from my hotel. Restaurant that I'd eaten at the day before, blown up. The discotheque that's right below my hotel, blown up. The shopping center where I went shopping for stuff for my wife, blown up. I mean, there before the grace of God go I could have been in any one of these locations when they went up. So I took it a little bit personal, you know. I'm like, you're killing innocent civilians. And no sympathy for Hamas whatsoever. But the Israeli people back then, oh, they cried on you. They cried like everybody else because this is horrible what happened, horrible. But they picked themselves up, they dusted themselves off, and they got on with the business of living. Why? because they had bought into the absolute necessity that there must be a peace with the Palestinian people, and Hamas did not represent the Palestinian people. Hamas was a terrorist organization. And now later on they find out that Hamas was a terrorist organization that was brought into being by Israel, by the Israeli security services, because they needed to divide the Palestinian people, to break them up so they couldn't speak with a single voice. But that's a different issue. My point is, those Israelis there were saying, we're with Yitzhak Rabin. He's the man that's going to lead us down the path of peace, a peace defined by a two-state solution where the Palestinian people would have an independent state. There was some controversy about what that would be, et cetera, but they were moving in that direction. Yitzhak Rabin was moving in that direction. When the day he was assassinated, November 4th of 1995, I was in Israel, and I was driven by the place where he was going to have his rally. And I was driven by an Israeli intelligence officer. I was working with Israeli intelligence about Iraqi weapons and mass destruction and things of that nature. And he knew that I liked Yitzhak Rabin. I had taken a bumper sticker of Yitzhak Rabin, and I had it on my folder. I thought it was cool. Peace, a good thing. And he said, Scott, don't go there tonight, because he knew that I was probably going to, out of curiosity, go to a peace rally and see what it was about. He said, don't go. I said, why not? And he said, there's violence in the air. Netanyahu, the opposition leader, is given a green light to treat Yitzhak Rabin as a Nazi. Rabbis have called for his death, and we believe there's going to be people in the crowd that want to kill him, and I don't want you anywhere near there. And I'm like, why aren't you telling this to him? He said, we have. We've told him don't go. We've told him to wear a bulletproof vest. He won't wear a bulletproof vest. See, Yitzhak Rabin was a man who believed in peace, and he wasn't going to allow anybody to intimidate him. And he said on the eve of his assassination, because he was assassinated that day, he went there, he spoke. He sang a song for peace. The bloodstained lyrics were in his vest. When the right-wing Orthodox Jew killed him. He wasn't killed by Hamas. He wasn't killed by the Palestinians. He was killed by a Jew, by a right-wing Orthodox Jew who said, my rabbi told me to kill him. One of these right-wing rabbis referred not to the Torah, but to the Talmud, which is sort of an interpretation of the Torah by rabbis. And many radicals refer to that because it gives them sort of carte blanche to kill people, to take Eretz Israel, to do things. A Talmudic scholar told him to kill Yitzhak Rabin, and he did. He killed him, ending peace. But we come back to Hamas. Hamas then continued their violence. This time, Benjamin Netanyahu took over from Yitzhak Rabin, didn't have the courage or the intestinal fortitude to tell the Israeli people, persevere through the violence, persevere, we will make peace. We will not let Hamas offer. No, because Yitzhak Rabin was killed by Netanyahu's people because he wanted peace. Netanyahu didn't want peace. He wanted to destroy Oslo and move Israel towards greater, because remember, he's Likud, from the river to the sea. Keep that in mind, people. From the river to the sea is a Likud chant. It was a Likud chant before it was a Hamas chant. And so Netanyahu goes in there and destroys everything Yitzhak Rabin stood for. Meanwhile, nobody's paying attention to the Palestinian people. Everybody's using the Palestinian people. All these deals are being cut that don't benefit the Palestinian people. In 2005, a decision was made for Israel to withdraw from Gaza. They had illegal settlements in Gaza, et cetera, to try and take it over, part of Eretz Israel. So they withdrew. And this was a political defeat for Netanyahu's government because he was under pressure from around the world to make this happen. But what he did is he said, because they're going to withdraw, and then there's going to be elections for the Palestinian state. And he said, well, we can't allow the Palestinians to unify. God, no, we can't let that happen. So what we're going to do as we withdraw, we're going to get Qatar to funnel all this money into Hamas to help convert Hamas from a terrorist organization into a political party that can run as a governing body, part of the government. And so Israel, Netanyahu, made Hamas what it is today, a political party that's able to participate in Palestinian politics. And guess what happened in 2006, Anya? They held an election. And the Palestinian people aren't stupid. They know what's going on. Guess who won the majority of the seats in the Palestinian legislature? Hamas. Scared the hell out of everybody. Israel went, that wasn't supposed to happen. Abbas went, that ain't supposed to happen. The whole world went, that ain't supposed to happen. And they didn't want it to happen. So the next thing they do is they promote a civil war between Hamas and Fatah, and they fought it out. Hamas takes over in Gaza, evicts Fatah. Fatah evicts Hamas from the West Bank. But now Gaza becomes a place where Hamas is the governing authority. Now, the interesting thing about a government is, unlike the Abbas government, the Palestinian Authority, who doesn't care at all about the Palestinian people, Hamas actually cares about the Palestinian people. They care about the future. They want them to have a land that is sovereign. They want them to have a port facility where they can bring in goods that they want. They want to have an airport so that passport-holding Palestinian civilians can fly around the world like you and I do. That's what people should be allowed to do in the international community. But Israel won't allow it, shuts it all down. Israel surrounds Gaza. And Hamas has been fighting for the Palestinian people ever since. October 7th was a military assault by Hamas against the Israeli military and military establishment, the occupying authority that manages the world's largest open-air concentration camp. Hamas did this. Now, people say that's a terrorist attack. What is a governing body supposed to do for its population when its population is being denied its rights, when its population is being abused, when its population is being subjected to torture, deprivation, and other criminal conduct by Israel? Does a true governing authority sit back and just say, let it happen, like President Abbas does with the Palestinian Authority? Or does a true governing authority say, we will stand up and defend with force of arms the rights of our people? That's what happened on October 7th. It was Hamas standing up and defending. And let me just point this out. Hamas had three objectives in attacking, and none of them were from the river to the sea, by the way. The first objective was to reignite discussions about a two-state solution or a Palestinian state. That's happening right now. On October 6th, no one was talking about a Palestinian state. No one was talking about a two-state solution. Right now, as we speak, a delegation of foreign ministers from the Arab world and the Islamic world are in China trying to get China to get involved in promoting a two-state solution. And the Chinese foreign minister has come out and said, this is our goal. There must be a two-state solution. Genocide Joe, even Genocide Joe is saying there has to be a two-state solution. Tony Blinken, his Secretary of State, says the number one goal and objective of the United States will be a two-state solution. Everybody's talking about. Now, that can just be this. It'll go away at an appropriate time once people let up the pressure. Guess who's not letting up the pressure? Hamas. Hamas ain't surrendering. They're not rolling over. They ain't going to be the little puppy to roll over and pee on themselves because Israel said, be afraid. Hamas is standing up. They're fighting, and they're fighting as we speak. The second objective was to get the thousands of Palestinians who are imprisoned by Israel in this Israeli prison system, people who are tortured, people who are murdered, people who are abused, many of whom are women. Some of these women are pregnant, and some of these people are children under the age of 10. They're imprisoned without due process. They haven't been charged with, they're just in prison. And Hamas, the governing body of the Palestinian people, imagine this, they did what Abbas will never do. They said, you must free the Palestinian people. And Israel said, we ain't doing that. So Hamas went out and captured their own Israelis. And they said, we'll give them back to you when you start freeing. Both Israel and the United States said that will never happen. We're not going to. Guess what? They're on the cusp right now of a prisoner release deal. I don't know if it's happened yet or if it's going to happen, but they're talking about a deal where hostages will be released in exchange for women and children prisoners held by Israel. That would never have happened, Anya, ever happen without what? October 7th. You see what's happening here? Hamas stood up and defended their people, and things are happening. Now we come to the third thing. Al-Aqsa Mosque, the third holiest shrine in Islam in Jerusalem, has been desecrated by the Israelis, desecrated by Benjamin Netanyahu, desecrated by the police, the soldiers. They have thrown tear gas grenades inside the Al-Aqsa Mosque while worshipers are there worshiping the third holiest shrine in Islam, and Israel is throwing tear gas grenades in there, going in and beating up the worshipers. Now, I'm not Catholic, but I've been to the Vatican, and I respect the sanctity of the Vatican. And imagine if the Pope is holding a mass in the Sistine Chapel, and non-Catholics stormed it and beat people up through tear gas. The Catholic faith would be up in arms. But because these are Palestinians in Al-Aqsa, nobody said a damn thing until Hamas attacked Israel. They named the attack Al-Aqsa Flood. And guess what? all of the Islamic world right now is talking about the sanctity, the necessity of not only maintaining the sanctity of Al-Aqsa Mosque, but if there's a two-state solution, that Al-Aqsa Mosque will fall under East Jerusalem, under Palestinian control. That no one was talking about that before this, Anya. It was Hamas's attack that made this possible. So for all you out there who say this was a terrorist attack, no, it wasn't. It was a well-planned military assault by Hamas against the Israelis to achieve political objectives that are being achieved right now at great cost. And here's the thing. The Palestinian people are paying the price. And some people, people say, well, why isn't Hamas doing anything? Hamas is doing something. If you've seen that movie Gandhi with the famous British actor with the bald head, I can't remember his name right now, but he played the leading role in it. And if somebody in the comments has that name, that would be appreciated, because I don't want to look too stupid. I'm feeling pretty stupid bringing up the movie right now. But there's a great scene in that movie where the British are trying to break a strike, and the Indians, Ben Kingsley, I love your audience, they're very well-informed people. Ben Kingsley, thank you very much. They've got all the Hindu people, the Indian people out there standing still. In order to break it, the British send in the police with their sticks, and they beat these people down. They beat them down, then the next wave steps forward. Nonviolent, they beat them down. But somebody could say that Gandhi was responsible for that. He could have stopped it by saying, don't strike. But the only way they got the result, and guess what happened? The British got tired of beating people, and so they stopped it. There had to be violence in order to get the objective. The sad fact is, none of this would happen. None of what Hamas is seeking to achieve on behalf of the Palestinian people could happen if Israel didn't do what it was doing. Israel, in order to defeat Israel, you have to expose Israel for the criminal entity that it is. And this is one of the tragic consequences of what Hamas has done, because they have triggered events that were designed to let Israel be Israel, to let Israel do what Israel does. Hamas didn't write the Dahiyad Doctrine, mowing of the grass, named after a West Beirut suburb that was flattened by Israel in 2006 during their losing effort against Hezbollah. Collective punishment became the official doctrine of the Israeli government, the Israeli Air Force. Hamas didn't write it. It was there. All Hamas did is create the conditions for the Israelis to act on this in a way that would turn the world against it. Sadly, the Palestinian people had to be sacrificed to get this outcome. Now you say that's heartless, but I always cite the example of the French and Charles de Gaulle in World War II. When the Americans and the British said, hey, we got to go across Normandy to liberate France, and we're going to do some pretty bad things, like bomb cities, bomb stuff, because the Germans occupied it. De Gaulle said, how many? How many French? And they said, a lot. They actually estimated about 120,000 French, and de Gaulle was sickened by it. But he said, it's just the price of liberty. And so we attacked. We killed between 20 and 60,000 French civilians. That's why de Gaulle, whenever they had a celebration of Normandy, de Gaulle never participated, because to him, the liberation of France came at the cost of 20 to 60,000 French civilians, and he felt responsible for that. But it couldn't have happened without that sacrifice. You could not have liberated France. You could not have freed Normandy from the Nazis and began the process that led to the liberation of France and the defeat of Nazi Germany unless that sacrifice was made. If somebody said, we can't invade Normandy because we can't kill any civilians, we can't allow for the sacrifice of the French civilians, then Nazi Germany would have won. Hamas can't, there would not be a two-state solution unless the Palestinian people paid this price. They're martyrs. They are martyrs. They are victims of Israeli aggression, but they are martyrs in their cause, the cause of Palestinian statehood. And I hope someday, when there is a Palestinian state, that they erect a monument. And on that monument, they put the name of every single Palestinian civilian murdered by Israel in the cause of achieving a Palestinian state. These people are heroes to their cause. They're heroes to their cause. And it never would have happened without Hamas. So stop talking about Hamas as a terrorist organization and start respecting Hamas as the only governing authority that has ever stood up and put it all on the line for the Palestinian people.
that when I listen to your words, sometimes I feel like there's so much coming information and so much emotion. I'm trying to process all of it. It's very intense, but it's very important. I want to ask you this two-state solution. Especially, I want to ask you about the West Bank area. You've been to that area, correct? To the West Bank, or you haven't? You've
I
been.
have. I've been.
Now, since this conflict has escalated now after October 7th, what's happening with those Palestinians who live in that area is getting worse and worse. So my question here is this: do you think they will remove all those Palestinians from the West Bank, and how that two-state solution how it will affect that particular region?
Well, let me again preface this, and I try to be as honest as possible, Anya. I am not an expert on Palestine. I was thrust into the Middle East because of the Gulf War, my role in the Gulf War, and then being brought in as a UN weapons inspector to rid Iraq of weapons of mass destruction. I became involved with Israel because of they were struck by Iraq during this war. They had a vested interest in the disarmament of Iraq, and we were concerned that their intelligence services were sitting on information about Iraqi noncompliance, and if we didn't gain access to that, they would use it to sabotage any effort we made to end sanctions that were linked to Iraq's disarmament obligation. That if I came out and gave a briefing that said Iraq is clean bill of health, that the Israelis would slide an envelope under the door that showed proof that they weren't, and then that would undo all our work. And so my approach was, let's go to the Israelis and find out what they know so that we can investigate it. And so I went to Israel, and when you work side by side with these people over the course of years in a very intimate and intensive environment. I mean, we had a common cause, the disarmament of Iraq. You view the world through their lens. And so I was guilty of that. I was guilty of anybody when I said, I am pro-Israel. I believe in it. And I believed in the Israel of Yitzhak Rabin. I believed in peace and all that, but I never identified with the Palestinian people. I'm guilty. I'm just staying straight up. I'm guilty. And that's an approach I've taken for most of my life, even as Israel has gone south and I recognize the righteousness of the Palestinian cause. I wasn't one of the people that went on the Gaza humanitarian ships. I wasn't one of the people that traveled to Gaza and put it all on the lines. I'm not, Eva Bartlett. I'm not Vanessa Beeley. I'm not Colleen Rowley. I'm not Ray McGovern. These are heroes who went out there and did stuff, on behalf of the Palestinian people. I'm not one of them. I didn't do that. Not because I don't care, but I was trying to stop a war in Iraq and hold my government accountable for what was going on in Iraq. I wasn't a Palestinian person. So I am late to the game here. I'm just being honest. I'm a new convert to this thing. But what Israel has done right now in response to this has woken me up to the absolute necessity that Palestine must be free. But here's the problem. I had Eva Bartlett on my podcast a while back, and I'm sitting there talking about a two-state solution. And she said, Scott, it's unrealistic, a two-state solution. It's got to be a one-state solution. So, and I've done enough reading since then to know that there are many reasons why people say there shouldn't be a two-state solution. There's many reasons why people say there should be a one-state solution. All I know right now is that the only thing being talked about at the official level across the board is a two-state solution. And I do believe that while Eva is probably right that in the long term, a two-state solution might not be practical, it's probably the only way you're going to get to a one-state solution, meaning to start off with a two-state solution and then let nature take its course as the two states learn to cooperate with one another and eventually blend and become a single Palestinian/Israeli state. This is well beyond my level of expertise and well beyond my remit. I'm not the guy that can sit here and articulate point by point by point why a two-state solution is good or a one-state solution. What I am going to say is that the Palestinians must have a state, a free and independent state. And how they get that state and what that state finally is is going to be something that's going to be resolved diplomatically. And the other thing, when you have this many players there, there will be compromises, meaning that people who say we must have a one-state solution might be compelled to compromise to a two-state solution to get that state. It's going to be a long and arduous process. But again, I come back to the point that none of this would be happening unless Hamas carried out its actions on October 7th. We wouldn't be having this conversation without that.
So what's going to happen with those Palestinians in the West Bank?
Well, I look, I think Israel's lost this. I think Israel's lost the world. We see that right now. I think Benjamin Netanyahu's government is history. They're going to be compelled to, he's going to be compelled to resign, and his government will collapse. I don't know how many iterations. Look, Israel had, numerous elections in the course of the past year or so, because they're a fundamentally divided country. And this issue, what's going on right now, will divide them even further. What I'm hoping is that you can reawaken the spirit of Yitzhak Rabin within the Israelis, so that they recognize the only way for peace and stability is in a negotiated settlement that leads to a Palestinian state. But Israel's lost. So no matter what Israel's trying to do and achieve on the West Bank, and it's nefarious, Anya, they are going in and they are destroying 1,000-year-old olive orchards to deny the Palestinians the ability to earn a living. They're stealing homes. They're stealing villages. This is just outright robbery. They're going in right now. The Israeli police go in with settlers, armed settlers, and they literally take over Palestinian property, and nobody's standing up. Nobody's defending the Palestinians. Where's Fatah? That's what I don't get. Why hasn't, yes, there are people that are starting to resist. Why hasn't Fatah declared war against Israel like Hamas has? Why hasn't Fatah mobilized its considerable strength and launched an outright attack to expel Israeli settlers and the Israeli government from Palestinian territory, to reclaim Palestine to its 1967 borders? I'm not talking about eradicating Israel, but I'm saying that every Israeli village, house, settlement, home that is in the West Bank that should be 100% Palestinian, must be removed. I would hope that the Israelis will leave peacefully, or the Palestinians will accept them to stay in there as citizens of Palestine. But the concept of Israel seizing this Palestinian land is a non-starter, and a two-state solution hopefully articulates or envisions a Palestinian state that's inclusive of all of the territory that would have been accrued to Palestine in the 1967 borders. Hardly any of that territory exists today because of Israel. But why isn't Fatah fighting for Palestine as strong as Hamas is? Or here's the ultimate insult. Hezbollah is up fighting in the north. They're fighting stronger for a Palestinian state than Fatah or Abbas. Why is it that Lebanese Shia have to die to promote a Palestinian Sunni entity? This is one of the problems with Palestine, is that they've allowed themselves to be hijacked by this most corrupt organization, the Palestinian Authority. And now, the Palestinian Authority will have to be reimagined, and it'll have to be reimagined in a way that is inclusive of Hamas. If there was fair and free elections right now in Palestine, Hamas would win not only the legislature, but the presidency, because they're the only ones out there fighting for the Palestinian people. Where is Fatah? Where is the Palestinian Authority? With all the atrocities that are taking place on the West Bank, where is it? Israel will continue to press, but as I said, what's going on in the West Bank right now is a extension of official Israeli policy is promulgated by this current iteration of a Netanyahu government. This government will collapse sooner rather than later. I think Benjamin Netanyahu is on his last legs, politically unsustainable position. He will have to go. His government will collapse. And we hope that the Israeli government that takes over will be a government that is more about pursuing peace than slaughtering Palestinians.
Thank you, Scott. Do we have time for 2 more questions?
I'm here for you.
Thank you so much. In one of your interviews, and apologies, I don't remember what who, because you have so many, you said that China could step up into this and solve this conflict. I want to ask you about it. How, in your opinion, that could be? How China could put an end to what's going on there in Gaza?
Well, 2 things. One, I don't presume to speak on behalf of the Chinese government. So anything I say is purely my opinion. It doesn't mean that there's probably going to be a bunch of Chinese guys going, no, 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 that ain't going to happen. Okay. So much for my analysis. But the other thing is that, you know, this is a very difficult problem. We have to understand that. So there's no ready solution, no matter what. But if you had done a poll of your audience, and I'd ask your audience just to reflect on this honestly right now. If I had asked you in February of this year, do you think that Saudi Arabia and Iran will normalize relations? What would the honest answer be? And the honest answer is hell no. Hell no. Saudi Arabia and Iran are butting heads. There's going to probably be a war. The United States has been promoting this war. The Abrams Accord is designed to bring Israel in with Saudi Arabia to oppose the Iranians. They're fighting each other in Yemen. And there's no way those two countries are going to come together. Yet in April of this year, China brought Saudi Arabia and Iran together, and there is a diplomatic rapprochement. They have now reopened their embassies. They're working together in a collaborative fashion on BRICS, on the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. The Iranian president traveled to Saudi Arabia to participate in a Gaza conference, and he was welcomed by the head of Saudi Arabia. Strange days, ladies and gentlemen. And you know who's responsible for that? Yes, we should give credit to Saudi Arabia and Iran. But China did that. China brokered that. China made that happen. So we can't discount the Chinese. Now, China has been saying for some time now that they'd like to play a role as a mediator of a Palestinian-Israeli rapprochement. They tried it in April after the success of the Iran-Saudi Arabia initiative. The Saudi foreign minister, or the Chinese foreign minister, reached out with phone calls to his counterparts in Palestine and Israel, but there could be no traction because Israel just didn't want to play that game. Netanyahu had just won election. He was now building this coalition, and that coalition was premised on there will be no two-state solution. There will be no Palestine. They were actually going to expand settlements in the West Bank and increase pressure on Gaza. So Israel was going in the exact opposite direction. It's hard to be a mediator of conflict, resolution when one side just doesn't want to play. You have to find a way to get Israel to say, yeah, we need to go to that table. That's happening right now. Israel has been defeated. They haven't won. They were defeated on October 7th. The struggle inside Gaza is such that Israel doesn't know if they have a solution. While their casualty figure may not be through the roof, it's high. They've suffered a number of wounded, but they've stalled in their ground offensive because they've lost hundreds of vehicles, including many Merkava 4 tanks, main battle tanks, not just in Gaza, but Hezbollah is popping them off up in the north too. And as a result, Israel was supposed to sell hundreds of their old Merkava 3 tanks to a foreign customer. I think Morocco was one of them. They've stopped that, and they said we have to bring all the Merkava 3s back up to combat capability and form reserve armor battalions because we're losing too many tanks at too great of a rate. This is Hamas knocking off the tanks. This is Hezbollah knocking off the tanks. And as I said, the Israeli government has failed. Whatever they thought they were going to achieve when they were formed is over. They're done. The new Israeli government is going to have to be looking for a way forward. Is the United States, who is the traditional broker between Israel and the Palestinian Authority, the United States has no more credibility because they signed on unabashedly with Israel. And so who has the gravitas and the reach to do this? And China is the obvious answer. This is why that the joint delegation of foreign ministers from around the Islamic world traveled to China first and met with the foreign minister to get the foreign minister to commit to it. And China has said they will get involved in this. They will play a role. Now, the question is, what do they bring to the table? Well, they bring to the table the fact that they are truly neutral. They haven't articulated on either side. They can be trusted as a impartial mediator. The other thing they bring in is, the United States, when it comes to the table diplomatically, we are always looking for a solution that benefits America's military posture in the region. That's all we care about. We don't care about anybody. That's the sad truth. That's why half the time our efforts fail, because people wake up to the fact that that's good for America, but what about us? China's coming in. Chinese approach isn't one that's predicated on military posture, but economic posture. Now we come back to what we talked about those gas fields, Anya. You can only exploit those gas fields if you have stability, geopolitical stability. That's where you get economic benefit. China is all about economic benefit. So they need stability. China has a vested interest in creating the conditions for stability in the Middle East so that these economies can thrive and interact with a expansive Chinese economic presence globally, one that includes now Saudi Arabia, Iran, and others. It could include Israel, it could include Jordan, it could include Palestine, it could include Europe. The connectivity that Joe Biden was seeking through the India Middle East Economic Corridor that sought to bypass China's Belts and Roads Initiative. I mean, just a little aside, you can't bypass the Belts and Roads Initiative when the basic building blocks of your own initiative, this India Middle East Economic Corridor, require the cooperation of the United Arab Emirates railway system built by China under the Belts and Roads, the Saudi Arabia railway system built by China under the Belts and Roads, Israeli port in Haifa built by China under Belts and Roads, going to a Greek port built by China under Belts and Roads. I mean, the bottom line is China's everywhere. You can't ignore them. You can't cut them out. So why not use them? This is what the Chinese come in. Plus, the Chinese have, this Belts and Roads Initiative is a infrastructure development program. China has invested some $7 to $10 trillion. That's with a T, ladies and gentlemen, $1 trillion over the course of the last 13 plus years. China has money that they're putting out there. China's somebody who could bankroll, for instance, the rebuilding of Gaza, the reimagination of Gaza. One of the things that Israel's done here is, and I'll use the example of Grozny. In 2002, Grozny, the capital of Chechnya, was flattened by the Russians as part of the First and Second Chechen Wars, flattened. I was just in Grozny in May. It's a totally reimagined city, a totally rebuilt city, physically beautiful. You would never tell that there was a war there except for the monuments and memorials that are placed throughout the city for the many thousands of people who died. But the city itself is a gleaming, shining city. As you approach Grozny at night, you think you're coming into Las Vegas because of the lights. It's just a spectacularly beautiful city. And here's the other thing. The Chechen-Russian conflict was bitter. Grozny today has giant mosques, brand new sparkling mosques, and giant Orthodox churches. For every mosque that's built in Grozny, an Orthodox church is built, because the Chechens say we are part of Russia, and Russia's an Orthodox Christian, state. But there's respect, and this is not a Russian demand. Vladimir Putin didn't say you have to do this. This is the Chechens saying we, the Chechens who are in control here, are going to create the conditions where Russians and Chechens peacefully coexist forever. No one would have thought that. Again, I just asked your audience to go back in time, try and project yourself back in time to 2000, 2001, 2002, and the hate that exists between the Chechens and the Russians, the hate, outright hate, and then say to yourself, I can somehow envision from this hate the Grozny I just described, the Chechnya I just described, and there's not anybody who's honest that can say, oh yeah, I saw that coming. No one saw it coming, but it happened. So now we come down to Gaza and the future of the Palestinian state. I'm here to tell you right now that under the right guidance, the right leadership, there is a peace deal that can be made that turns Gaza into a reimagined entity, part of a Palestinian state, to play an important role on that. And it can reimagine Israel to be a nation capable of living in peace and harmony with its neighbors. It's possible, ladies and gentlemen. You just need the right leadership. That leadership does not reside in Washington, D.C. That leadership, I believe, resides in Beijing, China.
Thank you, Scott. I said 2 questions. However, I have one more. Just want to ask you this. Maybe strange, but I really want to know your take on this. Some people were commenting, and I have to admit, a while ago, I had the same approach. Now, I'm changing my mindset about it. Some people said you can trust Russia, you can't trust China. I haven't been to China yet, as you know. I would love to go and see with my own eyes, as much as I can see, of course, and see the country. But do you think there is any chance that China could ever turn against Russia?
Look, the history between China and Russia is complicated. You know, back in the late 1960s, early 70s, they actually had border skirmishes that killed hundreds of people. And, you know, the whole idea of Nixon going to China was a Henry Kissinger concept of trying to drive a wedge between China and Russia to weaken the Soviet Union. And it succeeded. They did separate the two. Russia in the 1990s was horribly weakened by the experience of the 1990s. And many Russians fear that China, with its revived economy and its large population, could, you know, consume the Far East, the Russian Far East. Simply that if Russia allowed relations to develop to such that the immigration and the investment and stuff would just make the Far East automatically become part of China. And so people have played upon those fears. And if you go to Russia and you dig deep in your questioning to Russians, you'll find that there's a lot of hesitancy in Russia about the Russian-Chinese relationship. But the thing that glues them together is the fact that the United States and its allies have sought to contain both Russia and China using the same mechanisms, the same tactics, the same techniques, the sanctions, etc., the military pressure in Ukraine and Taiwan. And the Chinese are looking at the problem, and the Russians are looking at the problem. They say, we got the same enemy. We got the same enemy. That enemy is the United States. That enemy is the West. And while Russia took a different approach, I mean, the special military operation was a military solution. Russia promised it. If this happens, it delivered. China doesn't want a war in Taiwan. Literally, that's the last thing they want. So the Chinese were a little taken aback when Russia went into Ukraine, but they then looked around. They said, well, if we go against Russia on this one, the same tools that are being used to destroy Russia will be turned on us. So we have to support Russia here. And they have. And what you have right now is a relationship of convenience, straight up pragmatic relationship of convenience. And that means that it can go either way in the future, just to be honest. I mean, if for some reason China believed that it would be best suited by courting the West or being courted by the West, you could see that China might start to turn off some of the cooperation that's taking place. I think Russia is sort of in a vulnerable position here because the success that Russia enjoys today in a post-sanctions environment, because they've defeated Western sanctions, is largely based upon how they've been able to get China and India to become the consumers of Russian energy in a way that not only replaced the loss of Europe and the United States, but made Russia even in a stronger position. So Russia can't afford to turn down the spigots. China, there's a whole big world out there, and China could turn to other oil producers and all that stuff. But right now it's not in their interest because of what the United States is doing. However, Russia and China are executing contracts of a strategic nature designed to make China invulnerable to American pressure if there was ever to be a ratcheting of things. For instance, food supply. Russia just signed a multi-year, multi-billion-dollar deal where they have become the supplier of Chinese food in a way that you don't have to use, shipping. So China doesn't have to worry about an American naval blockade or American interference with the shipping lanes that feed China. It comes right across the border. The same thing with the gas and the energy, right across the border. China has basically secured a lifeline to Russia, and China's going to need that, want to sustain that. And that could cut both ways, because if Russia were to improve relations with the West, Russia could take that grain and feed it back to the West. So they're becoming mutually supportive. And the longer that goes on, what you get is a relationship that may have been pragmatic at first, but becomes strategic, becomes a strategic relationship. And then it becomes almost impossible to separate the two. And the Russians are quickly learning to get over not being able to drive a Mercedes. Yeah, that was the car of the 90s and the 2000s. You've been to Moscow. Everybody drives a Mercedes. But you know what else was also in Moscow quite a bit? Chinese luxury models. China has a lot of cars in Russia. China makes a lot. And they make
cars. They replaced the Tesla. They replaced Tesla. I always forget the name with this electric car, Scott.
I forget it too. But yeah, China has a better electric car than Tesla, and it's in Russia right now. The Chinese make good stuff. This isn't the old days where, made in China meant it was going to break in 3.2 seconds. No, the Chinese make good quality stuff. It's there, and Russia's getting it, and Russia's saying, this ain't bad. This ain't bad at all. And if Germany doesn't want to do business with us, we'll go to China. And that's what's happening here. We're seeing a strategic shift. And if this continues for a decade, as it likely is, because a key aspect of this relationship is the good relations between Putin and Xi. This goes beyond just being strategic allies. I think they like each other. I think they enjoy each other's company. You can see this genuine human connectivity. And if that stays for a decade, from that will come other human contacts and more human. This is why I always say, Anya, that the key to resolving problems is human to human contact. Human to human contact. I'm a big proponent of JFK's American University speech that he delivered, I think, in June of 1963, during the height of the early days of the Cold War, when everybody was promoting war. And what he said is because they just had the Cuban Missile Crisis in 62, where we almost had that war. And he's talking about, how do we get out of this? And he said, we can have, differences of opinion, and we're going to have differences of opinion. But the key to resolving this is to get into the shoes of the other people, to put yourself in the shoes of the Soviets and see the problem from their perspective, to try and understand and empathize where they're coming from, and hopefully get them to do the same for you. And now you can sit down and say, hey, I understand this might irritate you. What can we do to lessen that irritation? You start working together to achieve a common objective. That's what we need to do. This is what I'm trying to do with Russia right now, encouraging people to interact with Russians, to go to Russia. You've been to Russia. You understand the importance of that mission. Is Russia perfect? Hell no. No one's saying Russia's perfect. Is Russia good? Pretty nice. Pretty nice. I enjoyed it. There's a lot of good things. There's some things that aren't good, but hell, I live in America. A lot of things I love about America. There's a lot of things that ain't right either. Does that mean I hate America? No, you try and fix the things that ain't right. It's Russia's job to fix Russia, not my job. It's not my job to go to Russia and criticize them. It's my job to go to Russia and experience Russia. My job to go to Russia and try to understand the Russian perspective so that I can better articulate it here in the United States as we move forward to solve these problems. We need to be doing the same thing with China. And I think that's the one silver lining that came out of the Biden-Xi meeting in San Francisco, was that they agreed to increase not just government-to-government communication, but to encourage academic exchanges so that students in America can go study in China and Chinese students can study in America, and to encourage tourism so Americans can go to China, Chinese can come here, and we begin that process of breaking it down. I'll tell you, that's happening right now between Russia and China. A lot of Chinese visiting Russia. When I was in Moscow, I'd go to the museums. The Chinese all over the place, getting to know Russia, which is beautiful. And in Russia and China, there's Russians getting to know China, so that all those prejudices that existed from the past can be overcome by people simply saying, well, I've been to China, I've talked to the Chinese. I don't view them as a threat. And the Chinese will say, yeah, I've been to Russia. I talked to the Russians. I don't view them as a threat. That's what we should do around the world, is just getting people to connect like that everywhere. And hell, maybe we wouldn't have to have militaries anymore. Who knows? But I do think that that the Russian-Chinese problem, it can go either way. It's early on in this dynamic, but I think the trajectory of the relationship is such that if it continues on this path, you're going to see Russia and China becoming closer and tighter. And it's not going to be easy for the West to split them apart. They don't, because they're not going to want to be split apart. Once the Russians figure out that the Chinese electric vehicle is better than the Tesla, why go back to the Tesla?
Actually, it looks really good, Scott. You know which one. It really looks good, that car. I was surprised.
Did you go inside one?
No, I haven't. I
went inside. It's just all the bells and whistles. I'm just going, whoa. I mean, cool stuff, really cool stuff, like pop down widescreen high definition TV so that the kids in the back can be, I'm not sure that I'd want to raise my kids that way, but I'm just like, that's standard? Yeah, that's standard. You're kidding me. I'd have to pay like $10,000 extra for something like that, which is why it's never in my car. But, no, the Chinese, it comes loaded with bells and whistles. We can make fun, like, again, I know we're getting a little diverted here, but, I was just struck in Russia by, like I'm in Moscow and the guy I'm walking with goes, he gets a phone call. Hey, we got to go. We got to be there. And I'm like, well, we're going to take the metro. And he goes, no. We're going to, and he stops. He takes his cell phone and he unlocks a car and we get in the car and he drives. And I said, what the hell did you just do? Did you just steal a car? He said, no. It's share ride. I got the app. I got on there. I'm in, I'm driving. We find a place to park. We park. He's done, leaves the car, they go. And I'm like, how'd that happen? And so I'm thinking that's Moscow only, but then we get to Ekaterinburg and there's share ride. We get the Volgograd, there's share ride. It's all over the damn country. They got this share ride thing. They just got bells and whistles in Russia that make life, more convenient, so to speak, that in America, I'm not saying we need it or what, but I'm just saying it's different and it's advanced. It's a new approach. We keep criticizing these places, but the more we learn about them, we realize that's pretty cool stuff.
They are ahead. Yeah, but they are ahead. They are ahead.
In many ways, they are ahead. In many ways, they are ahead. Yeah, they're beating us. And that's, I mean, see, I don't feel threatened by it. I want to come back here and say, maybe we should find a way to do share ride too, except we got gangs that'll break in and steal the cars. And, we got to solve a whole bunch of, societal issues. But, the Russians aren't inclined. I'm not saying it never happens, but, nobody seemed to be worried about it because I'm like, can't you just steal the car? Like, no, you need the car's locked. You can't get in it. But then they're like, but nobody wants to steal the car because it's so convenient the way it is right now. Nobody wants to steal the car. I'm like, well, in America, I can tell you that the list of people who want to steal that car is very long. Not so distinguished, but very long.
Scott, I want to thank you. One more question, the last one from the viewer, as I promised. But I want to thank you for saying what you said about something that I believe is actually how I approach everything in life. When humans connect on the heart level, at least they try from the heart, and they carry the conversation, and they open up to another human, I believe everything. I still believe it. Everything can be solved, truly everything. Sometimes it takes longer. Sometimes it's a really, really wounded person, very traumatized. You have to go through many layers, but you can always connect. Just don't give up on that other person. This is just my approach. So thank you for saying this, because I think this is the only way to create peace in the world ultimately. And like you said, then the military is not necessary, and that's why they don't want people to connect like this. So there we have it. A question from the viewer from the last live stream we had, Rafik Adams, I think it's his name. Sorry, Rafik, if I mispronounce your first name. What is West plan for Iran? He asked. To provoke reaction to justify strikes. Did you read the 2009 Brookings Institution report on Iran path to Persia? This was the question, Scott.
I've read the report, and I've read other reports as well. Let's just be clear here that American foreign policy objectives towards Iran are dominated by Israeli considerations. And the Israelis have determined that Iran's nuclear program is an existential threat to Israel. They haven't been able to prove that Iran has a nuclear weapons program, but the Israeli posture is that so long as Iran has a nuclear enrichment, a uranium enrichment capability, they possess the basic building blocks for a nuclear weapons case. And they're right, of course. If you can enrich uranium, you can enrich it to a level that suddenly makes it military grade. But there's safeguard agreements, international inspectors in place, and Iran has said they don't want a nuclear weapon, but they do want a peaceful nuclear energy program. Imagine that. So, but Israel said no, so we've taken the stance. We've also, America is doubly damned in this regard because of what happened in 1979 when the Iranian students went over the walls of the U.S. Embassy and took American 52, I believe it was, Americans hostage and held them for a very long period of time. We increased the emotionality of that moment by talking about Desert One, where we sent in a hostage rescue team that ran into a debacle. A helicopter flew into a C-130 refueler, blew up, and 8 Americans died. I have a very good friend who was on that mission, and he was burned running into that aircraft to save the lives of people. And I have to tell you that has scarred he and I were the best of friends. You can't even imagine how close we are. But on the issue of Iran, we have interesting discussions, but his point is that theocracy's got to go. It's inherently evil. He will never forgive them for what he views as creating the conditions where his colleagues died. I'm somebody who believes that we can have good relations with Iran. It hasn't affected our friendship, but when we talk, we don't even get to this level. It's very calm talk because we just respect each other too much. But it's just the fact that there's a lot of Americans who hold deep felt resentment towards Iran because of that. And as a result, the American government feels empowered to undertake policies designed to remove the theocracy in Iran, regime change policy. And that is the official policy of the United States. The Iranians know this. Just the other day, I was in an event in New York City where senior Iranian officials were present, and they talked about, you recall there was the incident with the girl who was taken into police custody because she wasn't wearing the hijab properly, and then she died in police custody, and her death was, the Iranians have backed up their contention that her death was from natural causes, that basically she had a birth defect that, went south and she died, and it had nothing to do with police brutality or anything like that. She was in police custody at the time, but, they didn't beat her to death. Maybe the stress of it caused it to happen, but the United States and others began the myth that she was beaten to death, and they used this to provoke an uprising in Iran. And this uprising wasn't an uprising that came from the grassroots. It was an uprising thrust upon Iran by the CIA and other intelligence services, British, Dutch, and others, using organizations and relationships that they had cultivated over the years. This was a war against Iran. It led to widespread violence throughout Iran, the kind of violence that actually made the regime a little nervous that maybe, this is a big, because it was a big problem. In the West, I don't think we understand what happened there. Because we buy into the narrative of, there's a demonstration here, there's a demonstration there. No. It was a CIA-funded and backed uprising designed to overthrow the regime. There was a lot of violence and a lot of movement in that direction, and the Iranians had to basically mobilize and destroy this attack. There was a veritable civil war inside Iran. The Iranians call it a war. What happened was a war, a revolution attempt by the West to overthrow the regime. It failed. And all those connections that we made, they're gone. They lost. But we're going to just do it again. We're going to continue down that path until we have a fundamental rethink about Iran. And that could happen only after we disenfranchise the political elite that believes that they gain some sort of domestic political advantage by promoting regime change. The American people have to change their approach. This is what I'm trying to say. Because at some point in time, if the American people say, Iran's not a bad place, and I've been to Iran, it's not a bad place at all, and they can sit there and say they want, I'm a guy, so I can't ever pretend that I can see the world from a woman's point of view. And I have daughters, and I would be pissed. I can't say that. I would be angry if people sought to diminish the ability of my daughters to interface responsibly with the world as equals of men, because they are equals of men, and they should be treated as equals of men. And so if somebody said, well, your daughter can't do this, that, and the other thing, I would be against that. Now, in Iran, is there a glass ceiling? Yeah, there is. There's no doubt about that. There's one here too in America, by the way, but we don't like to talk about it too much. But women are treated with respect in Iran. They are professionals. Unlike Saudi Arabia, they can drive, they can teach, they can do medicine, they can do all this stuff. And the women of Iran, for the most part, I mean, you're always going to get a fringe. Understand, in Tehran, northern Tehran is an element that was westernized under the Shah, and the people that live in northern Tehran continue to have relations with the West, and they want to promote that. And so they're very much against the theocracy. But the people out in the villages and the towns and who have come to the cities, they're not anti-theocracy. In fact, they view the theocracy as promoting women's rights by protecting women from the things that women are subjected to in the West. What I'm trying to say is that Iran is not a bad place. That there's a lot of exaggerations put out there about the Iranian people. They're smart people. I mean, come on, guys. This is not a backwards nation. Iran puts out more peer-reviewed PhD theses per year than any other nation in the Middle East. That means peer-reviewed isn't just within Iran. That means they're farming them out to the world. And all the best minds of the world are reviewing this and commenting on it. The Iranian scholars are very smart. Their scientists are very, very good. Their doctors are good. These are smart people, world-class people, but we don't treat them with that respect. We treat them as somehow a third world nation, etc. You're wrong. Look up the math Olympics and see where Iran places every year in the math Olympics, and then compare where the Americans place every year, and tell me who's doing a better job of educating their people. So the Iranians are okay. Go ahead.
China too, right, Scott? China and Iran.
The Chinese. Yeah, we're just doing it wrong.
Yeah,
we're doing it wrong. And we're doing it wrong on a number of fronts. We're doing it wrong on core skill sets like math, but we're also doing it wrong on English. Communication is such an important skill, and you can't communicate if you're ignorant of the language, and you have to study the language. But we've allowed the study of the English language to be diverted by different things. And civics, I mean, it's a joke. You see, they make a joke of it on you've seen the things where the guys go up and say, go to a college campus and who could pass the citizenship exam, and it turns out that none of them can, because none of them have studied the Constitution. They don't know anything about government, and yet the immigrants.
Can I say, Scott? Now I feel better with my English. Thank you for saying this. No, because I
your English is you can communicate. You can communicate very well.
I'm trying my best.
No, but if you get, for instance, if they keep talking about trying to, we want to make all of the benefits of being an American available to all Americans. But if communication is an important role, and you pull somebody out of a education environment that doesn't emphasize, speaking properly, it doesn't matter. When you bring them to the interview, they're going to fail the interview. They're going to fail the interview because they can't communicate. They've been denied an opportunity because we didn't take the time to educate them properly. How can you defend? I'm getting off course here, but if you call yourself an American, and there's many people out there that say, I'm a proud American. Well, what defines us as an American? And there's only one thing, the Constitution of the United States. That's what separates us from everybody else. The system of government that is set forth under the Constitution, the notion of the rule of law, the notion of equality. All men/women are created equal. Wow, that's cool stuff. I took an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. It's an important oath. I've actually taken the time to read the Constitution because I sort of like to know what I'm dying for. I don't claim to be a constitutional scholar, but I'm familiar with the Constitution. I can pass the citizen exam. My wife can pass the citizen exam. She had to because she's not a natural born American. She had to come over here, study, take the test, got 100%. But the point is, all you Americans out there that are saying, I'm an American, God bless America. That's another statement. God bless. What does that mean? God bless America. God only blesses America. I thought we had a constitution that says all men are created equal. Are we saying only all American men are created equal? Because all men implies all of humanity, and God sort of created the world. It says so in the Bible. God created the heavens and the earth. 6 days, took a rest on the seventh. But when he created the earth at that time, did he point down to America and say, I only bless these people? Well, we know he didn't do that because according to the Jews, he blessed them. My point is, God bless America. When you say it over and over again, what you're saying is, God damn the rest of the world. That's what you're saying. You're saying that the rest of the world is lesser than Americans. All right. Hey, all you Americans that believe that we are the exceptional people, take a test on the Constitution. Take the citizenship exam and be honest enough not to go Google it and study it. Take it right now. Go find it, take it. And then honestly tell me whether you passed or not. And I will tell you right now that over 90% of you will not pass it because you're unfamiliar with the Constitution, which means you suck at being American because you don't know what being American is. You can't define it because you don't know the Constitution. So anyways, I got distracted there, but let's end on a positive note, Anya.
Yes, the positive note is actually from what you just said. I want to wish you and your family happy Thanksgiving.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, it's a big holiday. It's a big holiday for American families and for my family in particular. So I appreciate that. And I wish you the same and everybody who took the time to tune in.
Thank you, Scott, so much for today. I'm always blown away by your knowledge. And I wonder how you were able, because you know so much, not just through the experience that you had, but through the study. And I wonder how you were able to do it, because you've been so busy when you were in military and you were inspector, how you were even able to study, because how you put your mind into so many different venues. That's what I'm trying to say. And then you absorb it. So thank you so much.
Thanks. There's some people, including myself, that wish I applied myself better, and had a real skill. But I appreciate the compliment. I thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you guys for watching. Very, very appreciate it. Hit that like, share the video. Let people see that there are some people who actually know what they are talking about, and they are not paid by the mass media. I'm just saying. Thank you guys. See you next time. Bye, everyone.